Hi, this is Lisa Escárcega. I'm State Board of Education, Congressional District 1 candidate, and I'm here today with Rachael Lehman, and she and I are going to be having a conversation. She's got some questions that she wants to ask, and so let me throw it right to you, Rachael. What's burning?
Well, I'm excited to talk to you. As a college professor, it's sometimes, and I would just say, I would think teachers in general, it's hard to know what your impact is until well after somebody's left my class and they will send me an email, a thoughtful email about something they read or learned, and they're like, oh my gosh, it so reminded me of your class, and I'm so glad you taught me about this. And so it's hard to see what your impact is. So I'm going to ask you, is there a teacher that you had that was like your favorite teacher, that was the most impactful, most thoughtful, somebody that just kind of you would like to give a shout out to right now?
All right, that's a good one. So I remember almost all of my teachers from first grade on. But the one that I love to talk about is Mrs. Stone. She was my music teacher in elementary school. And this is, of course, in the day where schools had a music program. They had instruments you could take home. They gave them to you, right? We were poor, and I had moved around. I had moved to like 12 different schools. Well, lived in a lot of homes by the time I was even in first grade. I was in foster care. So we were quite poor, and I was given a violin to take home, and I was able to learn music. But why she is my favorite teacher, or why I remember her most, is she was talking to me one day, and she leaned over and she said, do you know, I know your Aunt Nancy. And I said, you do? She said, yeah, I know who your aunt is. I know your family. And I immediately, almost for a second, there was a moment of a panic, because this woman now knows everything about my background. She would have known everything we've gone through. And she smiled at me and then continued to be the nicest teacher. And I realized, oh, I don't really have to be ashamed, right? This woman knows me. And she just made a connection. That's all she needed to do. And just changed my life. Just changed my life. So she's one of my favorites.
Lisa, you're about to make me cry. That is so beautiful.
She's not with us anymore. There's no doubt about it. She was close to retirement when I left elementary, but she just touched me on the shoulder, and that was that. So.
That's as a teacher, I'm so glad to hear that. Like that impact was there. And they say that it takes one connection, just one connection for kiddos to succeed and thrive. And it takes teachers just basically caring, like one student, like connecting with them and like bringing them in and letting them know that you care. And I love that you got that. And then so are you still playing violin?
I played actually in through like middle school, and then we moved. Of course, we know that was part of our pattern, and we went to a place that didn't have it. I took it up in college, and my younger sister heard me play one day, and she said, not quite the same anymore, is it? And I said, yeah, it's a little harder this time. I would agree. Actually, I do play a little bit. I play a little bit of piano, but my most recent thing is drums. I've taken up the drums. I bought a set just down in my basement, banging away all my frustrations.
I love it. You'll have to do a drum solo for me one time.
I will try.
Yeah, it would be great. You could get some Guns N' Roses or something. It'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next question for you, equity, and just talking about equity. Now, a lot of folks talk about equity in terms of like equality gaps in learning and being able to learn. And this all has to do with it. It's all layered, and when we try to separate it out, it becomes really problematic. So the first piece of equity I want to ask you about is digital equity. So as we are moving more and more from, all of us moved at home. what are some challenges that you can see that there will be with digital equity? And then what are maybe a solution that you have to kind of get us so that we are, again, closing some of those gaps?
Yeah. So in my current job, which I have for just a couple more weeks, I'm working with 178 school districts, and we just had a meeting even today where they're talking about the divide and the equity gap. We've got literally areas of the state that don't have internet. You can't get it even if you needed it, and hotspots don't work. We have that, everything from there to, I talked to a parent on the phone. I had this within one day, 2 different parents. One parent that said, oh, this is wonderful. My kid is loving it. I got him on. I had a little bit of needed a little bit of tutoring, but got my child on. Everything's wonderful. And then they have connection, right? And then you have another parent who's got connection, but was really crying with me on the phone because she was having to be home with her children and she was afraid she was going to lose her job. So it's so many layers. You might have access, and that's one issue where we know there's quite a bit of disparity. The Denver School District, of course, and surrounding districts have given out as many devices as they can. They've even given out hotspots, but honestly, we were not prepared to have teachers take over and students take over in this fashion as quickly as we did. So what divide I think was already there is now, well, as we've been saying, is now exacerbated. It's even worse. And then you have the divide on parents that can help, parents that can't, which is, think the homework, this is even more so. I think back to how the evolution of online learning has taken place. And when we first started, we thought, yep, this is going to be easy, kid and computer, you just do it. And then the realization that probably a blended model where you've got an adult, a teacher there with them at some point during the day, right, where they come in, you've got support, and then the students doing it on their own as well, kind of that flipped classroom kind of concept. That would be ideal, but we didn't get that opportunity. We went from nothing to, in so many places, to total online, that I think the future is, okay, from what we've learned from this, if we go back, and when we go back in the fall, we already know it's not going to be the same. We're already having conversations about differences in classrooms and setup and technology. Could it start out as a blended model where we do some part-time, part back? We've got to have childcare, though. We've got to have support so people can go back to work. And so for those parents, those students whose parents can't be there with the online, how can we help them? I think that would make this much more equitable so that we've got students who are really all benefiting from online. And that's kind of where we have to be. And I do think the district, if you had said a month ago or 6 weeks ago, Denver, in 3 weeks, you're going to 100% online K-12, no one would have believed it. There's no, you wouldn't have believed it. So what we can do under pressure is amazing, but I think that's where we need to focus, is more of that blended model, so that all kids get the support they need.
Very good. I totally hear what you're saying. I mean, this was a huge leap in a very short amount of time. And I've actually taught concurrent enrollment, and so the students who are taking classes for college credit in high schools. And when I was teaching in the high schools, I would have to kind of change things up a little bit because they didn't have adequate internet at home. And so as a college professor, I would expect that you could do homework and you could do research for a paper. But those opportunities weren't there, and I'd have to kind of do as you were talking about with this flipped classroom, and do more of like, let them do the hands-on things and in the class and get that research together. And it is a challenge. I mean, as we move forward, I mean, and this is really problematic in a lot of ways because our society is wired this way. Right? And so our students have to be able to adapt and be able to thrive in this environment.
What do you
I appreciate that.
potentially like a citywide, and I know it's been spoken about, citywide internet and access, right? Free access for all.
I think that's a great idea.
How can we not do that? If that, especially if we're doing all workers and so much of it, yeah, I wonder about that. And cities have done that, right?
Well, and I mean, that's when you're, it's kind of an aside, but it is in a way when people are asking you to go home for school, college, universities, work, and they're asking you to do all these things from home, well, then there's all these like overhead things that people didn't even consider. Like I've been really intentional in asking my students, do you actually have a space to work at? Like legitimately. Are you in a studio apartment and do you actually have a desk? Do you have like somewhere to kind of, like, you shouldn't be doing all of your work in your bed. Like,
yeah, correct.
You just, I mean, just from a mental space kind of way, you have to be able to kind of, okay, now I'm going to eat dinner at a table, and then I'm going to come over here and watch some TV, and then I'm going to come over, like, to kind of create those mental spaces that are different, because then the work gets done differently, right? Just it's like they tell you, even if you don't have a job and you're out looking for a job, you should like actually dress in professional clothes, even when you're talking on the phone, because it makes it so that you actually kind of come up to that standard, instead of thinking like, instead of in your like yoga clothes or something. And
it does remind me of educators and what we're hearing right now, right? Teachers and folks that are having to beef up their service and their systems to even teach online. And I'm imagining, and I've talked to, educators, they're not only the teachers, but they're children's teachers, and that they're at home. And this is just not sustainable long term. So back to your idea of, or, your thoughts, and we've learned a lot, and this can't be how online looks in the future.
No, I mean, and it's not just getting people laptops and online, computer, like getting good internet service as well. It's about all those things, like supplies, like, where are my Post-it notes at? Those kinds of things. It's like, oh crap, I can't go to the supply cabinet and grab Post-it notes. I gotta buy those myself. But I need a desk. I need a chair. Like all these things that, working from home, you have to have a certain number of some of things. But cool. So my other question about equity is about environmental standards in our school buildings. Lead is probably one of the most important things. There's lots of other chemicals that are equally important as well, but lead is part and parcel of the problems that happened in Flint, Michigan, and caused the developmental delays in the brain structures of those kids. It's actually a pediatrician who kind of sounded the alarm because she was seeing a lot of things that weren't kind of adding up. There's also a lot to be said for the cumulative effects of toxic chemicals, and that usually when they look at standards, they say you can have this much lead, this much arsenic, this much benzene, all these other chemicals, but they don't actually, that doesn't account for how they work together to create like sort of an additional toxic load. And then there's these other things that are called forever chemicals, PFAS chemicals, and those are things that stay in your bloodstream forever and they never leave your body. And so that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. And there's a lot that schools can do to increase those environmental standards. For instance, making sure that there's filters on all the water fountains. I have a filter on my own faucet at home. There are those water fountains that actually have like a filter system that are the new ones that you can use your own water bottle. And there's other kinds of water supplies there as well. And then also air quality and measuring air quality and air standards. There's a school called Garden Place, and it's over in Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, and they have air monitors there. But the air monitors aren't where the kids are, if you know what I'm saying. Like, this is an elementary school, so the air monitor should be kind of lower so that we have a true reading of what their air quality is. So there's just so many things that the schools, the structures of the schools and the buildings can actually do to promote this. Like whatever we can do, all hands on deck at these buildings that they're spending, 40 hours a week at. And I can't control that. I can control my house, but I can't control my schools where my kids are going. So what are some thoughts that you have on improving those air and water quality standards in schools?
Well, and it gets into one of my areas. I would say is not my. I'm very knowledgeable about school construction, but it's certainly not my area of expertise. And so this is where you do your research and you get with people, right? And you get with experts, and you would be among those, right? That I would be asking. My initial thought is always around sources of funding that districts do get. That's always an area where you can influence, whether it's through legislation or something, where you can influence certain funding to go into a direction or a pool, and then you set parameters around what it can be spent on, right? And I think that is really one potential way to look at it. I'm not talking about at this moment with our current crisis going on. We'll just scoot into a better time. That is one way I can see as a state board in the influential role to go that way. But I would certainly want to work and know more about what is the current, right, in Congressional District 1, what are the schools really doing? What are the disparities? I would want to know, because I hear it all the time, and this is really a Denver public schools, and you actually bring up a good topic. People get confused about Denver school board role and a state school board role, and certainly the Denver board has full authority and control over the construction of their buildings. So, but wanting to work with that board so that they comfortable, they know, and they have the information across the district, across all the different sites. But I've heard things like the difference between water in some of the school buildings and parents having it very noticeable, and it's come up several times. So I think it's something worth exploring and talking with the Denver board about, and then just kind of seeing where in the state to use that influence, right? Yeah.
That's really good. I mean, to think of just in terms of funding and who's doing the construction, all of those are things that you can control, right? And we can actually make asks about. As our, we do know that in the current administration that the EPA was effectively dismantled. So a lot of there's a lot of work to be done for sure. So it's kind of an interesting time, right? Because we have what we know in the, like, for instance, EPA being dismantled. So it's like we want to continue to have standards, but who's piloting this ship? Right. Like, how do we, like, I'll go to the head of EPA and ask them, oh, where's that building? Where'd that go? but there's these things where it's like, because these things are kind of being challenged right now, it's hard to actually get accountability around some key issues that we need accountability around. And then finally, I am a college professor, so I'm wondering, college preparedness is something that's really important to me, especially for K through, or pre-K through 12 actually. What I notice in my role, I notice that there's some gaps as far as, like, some kiddos coming from high school are, they're able to write a paper easy peasy lemon squeezy, and they're like they're doing their citations correctly, they're doing all the things, their papers are really wonderful. And then we have other students who struggle, and there's definitely some more. We definitely need those wraparound supports. We need to have, writing centers. We need to have all of this extra time and effort, which, everyone deserves time and effort spent on them. So I'm not questioning that. The question that I have is that there is such a discrepancy in college preparedness. So how can we get that gap, narrowed? And then, because what we see is that in community college in particular, there's an extremely large Black male melt. And so by first semester, a lot of Black males don't finish. And so this is, I'm thinking this is endemic, and it didn't just start with them entering as a freshman into community college. This is something that, from their whole college or their whole career as a student, they've experienced some things that, and when they get to community college or college in general, it's exacerbated because they haven't been prepared. What are your thoughts around that? I know that that's a lot.
No, it is. And I too taught. I was a professor, right? And I actually taught graduate school. And even there, you see a difference in folks coming in. There was a day, I think, when universities, all the students came in and they looked the same. And they had kind of the same preparation. And I think those days are long, long gone as we tried to open up our university system to everybody, right? And this idea of give it a shot, try it, right? And see, you may be surprised. And so universities have certainly adapted to the changing demographics, the changing students come in. I think to some extent, high school, we've adapted, but not to the same extent, probably of what we need to. So if I'm thinking, it comes back to equity, and why do we sit and have and probably somebody's going to shoot me for this, but why do we have this high school, we have this master schedule, I know how it works, and this is the schedule for you. This is your schedule, and you have to have this many hours and this many classes, and you're going to go through, and here's your freshman, your sophomore, your junior, your senior year. And then, well, if you need help, we're going to try to get it over here. We're going to try to fit it in here. Oops, the funding went away. Can't do it here. Can't do it here. And I don't know exactly what it looks like. But to me, equity at high school is a student takes the classes and gets to go to school as long as they need to in order to get to the level that they need to be in order to, if they want to go to college, go to college. Maybe that's 5 years. Maybe that's 7 hours instead of 5 classes. Whatever it is, maybe it is smaller class sizes in some subject areas. But it's got to be 25 or 30 because we allot our teachers based on number of students, right? So we still run this very systematic, and I understand, I've seen the master schedule, I understand how it works, but I think that is still a barrier around equity for kids. We do have some high schools, like if you're a Spanish-speaking student, you come in to our high school's freshman year. Yeah, it's going to take you longer than 4 years to get 4 years of content and fully proficient in English. People are like, okay, we kind of get that. But outside of that, they're not seeing, they don't understand, and they're like, nope, you got 4 years. We want to know the 4-year graduation rate, that's it, you're done. And I think we can be more imaginative, and it really starts in preschool. If I really want to go there, preschool, working up all the way through, this lockstep education system we have, we continue to get the same results in the same system over time, and we should not be surprised. So,
oh, Lisa, you are talking to my heart right now.
Oh, well.
It is, I mean, and then it carries on to college, right? Where you get put into a plan to study, and it's like, oh, you're taking longer than 2 years to finish your associates. Well, there's something wrong with you. Oh, there's something wrong with me is that I'm a single mom and I have lots of work, and it's going to have to be 2-3 classes and not a whole load of 5 or so, right?
Right, exactly.
So I love that. I think that just that idea, like identifying that this one size fits all, put them down a path, put them down a master plan, whatever that word is that they use.
That's right. And I think truly a larger investment in education is a barrier that we just need to break through, and we need to invest more resources so you can do this kind of dynamic schooling. Because in part we're forced because of our restricted budgets, and I call it the starvation of public ed in Colorado. But yeah,
I agree.
Yeah,
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
On this snowy digital day.
Yeah, this blizzard little day that we have. So, well,
Mhm.
it's been great talking to you.
Me too.
And we'll follow up and appreciate it. Appreciate your
Yeah.
time.
Thank you so much.
Bye.